Have you ever wanted to win a tennis Grand Slam or be the best chess player in the world?
And if so, do you think it's too late to start learning now? Do we actually have to start young to master new skills? That's the question, and Arturo Hernandez says, no, you don't. He's a professor of psychology at the University of Houston and the author of Mastery: How Learning Transforms Our Brains, Minds, and Bodies. Good morning, Professor. That's a really interesting topic. So how important is it actually to start learning young? Did I miss my chance to become a violin virtuoso, for example? Is it too late now?
Thank you for inviting me, Evelyn. It's great to be here. Yes, starting early is really important. I think if you want to reach those high levels of achievement in virtually every kind of domain, there are some places where athletes, for example, an example is Hakeem Olajuwon, who was a soccer player and didn't really pick up basketball till about 16 or so like a teenager. He became a great NBA player. So there are examples of maybe adolescent people who become world-class masters. There are some domains where people can become really good. Poker players, for example, can become really good when they learn later in life. But I think to become best in the world, that's a hard task for an adult to achieve. So I think we have to be mindful of that.
That's a really good point. Now, if we want to achieve, maybe not, we don't want to aim that high, but you're saying still reaching your goal, it depends on getting the right practice, right? It sounds like not all practice is created equal, so how do we approach it best?
Yeah, so there's a type of practice that was made famous by Anders Ericsson. He was a person who worked on the issue of mastery, and I talk about that in my book, Mastery: How Learning Transforms Our Brains, Minds, and Bodies. And the idea behind this type of practice is what's called deliberate practice. Deliberate practice involves feedback, right? So feedback has to do with the fact that when you do something, you get some sense of whether you're going in the direction you'd like to go or maybe not in the direction that you'd like to go. And that feedback, and sometimes being a little bit more difficult, which produces this feedback, I think it's really important to get practice of that type.
So what do you think about, we hear a lot about when we see somebody, especially polyglots that speak a lot of languages, oh, they're so talented, gifted. That's something we hear a lot, but how much do genes actually play a role here?
Yeah, that's always the $1 million question, and it's become a $5 million, $10 million question, because what's happened in the world of genetics is, of course, we're born with certain genes, and as I talk about in my book, there's an example, for example, of the Bryan brothers, who were very, very good tennis players. Their parents were tennis players. They became tennis players. They became a very good doubles team, but each one of them was different. Right, so one was left-handed, the other was right-handed. One was taller, one was shorter, one was stronger, one was slightly not as strong. And so genes do play a role. These are twins, by the way. So they're identical twins genetically, and yet the outcome is not identical. So genes play some role, but the environment changes things too, including the womb environment. Some argument has been that because twins are together, their handedness changes because one is right and one is left, depending on which hand is free. So even the womb environment before birth can play a role. So genes are important, but environments are important too.
Very interesting. Now, walk me through, in your book, you talk about the 5 principles of mastery. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, so the 5 principles of mastery, right? So that I call them 5 principles, not the 5, because I think there are plenty of them beyond the 5. But these 5 that I've identified are will, right? So what do you like to do? What are you willing to do? Ability, are you pretty good at something? Sometimes we can be slightly better at some things than others. The third is opportunity. I think we all need a chance. We all need some kind of door opening to allow us to continue getting better at something. The fourth one is flexibility. Flexibility is sometimes we need to change course. Sometimes we're not quite going the way we'd like to go. And then finally is clarity. I think the hardest one is clarity, right? What is it? Have we achieved what we want to do? Is it clear what our goal is? And I think those, for some people, it's super clear. For other people, it comes and goes, right? Sometimes there's clarity, and then we have to start over again.
So tell me more about, because it's in the title of the book, learning it transforms our brains. Tell me how exactly, what does it do to our brains, our minds and bodies to learn new skills?
Yeah, so when we learn new skills, so for example, if we pick up something like when we learn a baseball pitcher, so I talk about baseball, for example, when baseball players play, right, their brains adapt. Their the parts of the brain that are involved in vision adapt to seeing a baseball. And so what you would see is you would see changes in fact, I think, in the nerve cells within the visual areas of the brain that would actually be sensitive to the spin of the ball, to how fast it's coming, to the release. So much so that a bunch of baseball players many years ago went out and actually tried to hit softballs, right? And softballs are pitched at a closer, the mound is closer, it's lower, it's pitched underhand. And a woman actually ended up striking out all these baseball players because their system was specialized to baseballs and to detecting, the neurons in their brains were good at detecting baseballs. But when the softball came, which they were not specialized in, they actually couldn't hit it.
Oh, wow. That's very interesting how we condition ourselves if we spend a lot of time in practicing something. Thank you so much. That's unfortunately all the time we have for this topic today. I could chat about it much longer, but Arturo Hernandez, Professor, it was really good to have you today.
Thank you for having me.